The Grayson family was an institution in aristocratic society, commanding respect and power that few could rival. Elijah Grayson, their only heir, was a man of privilege, groomed for greatness. But behind the facade of perfection was a rebellious soul. Despite being engaged to me, Celine Vale, he fell for Clara, a young nanny employed in our household. Clara was everything I wasn't: meek, unassuming, and seemingly pure. She wormed her way into Elijah's heart, and he began to look at me as though I were an obstacle to his happiness. When he confessed his love for Clara and called off our engagement, my world crumbled. The man I loved, the man I had envisioned a future with, chose someone who didn't belong in our world. Unable to bear the thought of him throwing away everything, I confided in his mother, unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. Elijah was placed under house arrest, and Clara, left waiting for him in vain, met her end in a tragic accident. Elijah was consumed by rage. In his grief, he blamed me for everything. His once kind eyes turned cold and cruel. Overnight, he became the head of the Grayson family, wielding immense power. He used it to destroy me. My family was ruined, our name dragged through the mud, and I was left destitute and humiliated. Elijah's revenge was relentless. He orchestrated events that led to my abduction, where I endured unspeakable torment before I finally died. As I lay on the brink of death, broken and bloodied, Elijah stood over me, his voice a chilling whisper. "Are you satisfied with the repayment for your betrayal, Celine?" When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the past, before Elijah's world had unraveled, and before Clara's death. The shock of finding myself alive was matched only by the residual pain of my previous death. My body trembled as memories of Elijah's cruelty flooded back. I saw him again, seated with Clara at a cafe, their hands brushing as they laughed over coffee. Clara's doe-like eyes sparkled with adoration, and Elijah's expression was softer than I had ever seen. In my past life, this sight would have driven me mad with jealousy, but now it only fueled my determination. This time, things will be different, I whispered to myself. I will not fight for Elijah's love, and I will not be the cause of Clara's death. Let them have each other, but I will protect myself and my family. I began making changes immediately. Instead of clinging to Elijah and trying to win his affection, I distanced myself. When his mother sought my help to persuade him to abandon Clara, I declined politely, feigning indifference. Elijah, taken aback by my newfound coldness, tried to rekindle our engagement. "Celine, we've been promised to each other since childhood. Don't you still care for me?" His words felt like shards of glass. Once, I would have clung to them like lifelines, but now they meant nothing. "Elijah," I replied calmly, "I care more about my dignity than about someone who doesn't want me. You're free to live your life as you wish." I could see the confusion in his eyes. My refusal disrupted the script he had written for us, and for the first time, he seemed unsure of himself. Behind the scenes, I quietly orchestrated an escape for Elijah and Clara. I provided them with travel documents and enough money to start a life far away from the suffocating expectations of society. When they finally fled, I felt a bittersweet sense of relief. But the scandal erupted faster than I anticipated. Their departure became the talk of the town, and the Grayson family's reputation took a nosedive. Elijah's father, enraged by his son's actions, disowned him and stripped him of his inheritance. Clara, unable to endure the backlash, left Elijah soon after. For the first time, I saw Elijah truly broken. He returned to the city a shadow of his former self, penniless, aimless, and defeated. The Grayson family's fall from grace after Elijah's scandal had left a void that needed filling. Enter Lucas Grayson, the illegitimate son who had spent most of his life in the shadows of his father's legitimate family. Unlike Elijah, Lucas was grounded, fiercely intelligent, and deeply pragmatic. Our engagement was not based on love, but on mutual benefit. Lucas understood the stakes, and unlike Elijah, he treated me with respect. There was no grand romantic gesture, just a quiet understanding that this was a partnership we both needed. "Celine," Lucas said during one of our private meetings, "I have no illusions about why this engagement exists. But I promise you this, I will protect you, and I will never betray you." His words, though practical, struck a chord in me. For the first time, I felt that I was standing beside someone who valued me for more than what I could bring to their life. Meanwhile, Elijah and Clara tried to build a life together far from the prying eyes of society. Initially, their love seemed to bloom. They moved into a modest cottage on the outskirts of the city, where Elijah learned to live without the privileges of his past. Clara, ever the optimist, tried her best to adapt to their new life. She cooked, cleaned, and filled their home with laughter. But cracks began to form. Elijah, unaccustomed to hard work, grew irritable and restless. Clara's simple joys, which had once enchanted him, began to feel like chains. One evening, as they sat together by the fireplace, Clara finally voiced her fears. "Elijah, do you regret choosing me?" He looked at her, his face a mix of exhaustion and regret. "I love you, Clara," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. "But love doesn't pay the bills or rebuild what I've lost." Clara's heart sank. She had given up everything for him, only to realize that the man she loved was not as strong as she had believed. "Lucas and I spent more time together, not out of romantic interest, but out of necessity. As the future faces of our families, we needed to present a united front. Over late-night meetings and shared meals, I began to see a side of Lucas that surprised me. He was witty and sharp, with a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard. One evening, as we worked through a financial report together, I caught myself laughing at one of his quips. 'See? You do have a sense of humor,' he teased, his green eyes sparkling with mischief. "Don't get used to it," I shot back, though I couldn't hide my smile. Lucas's presence was steady, unshakable. He didn't try to impress me with grand gestures or charm me with empty words. Instead, he earned my trust through his actions. When I shared my concerns about my family's finances, he immediately offered solutions, treating my worries as if they were his own. Our relationship shifted during a charity gala. Dressed in a shimmering silver gown, I felt the weight of the room's attention on me as Lucas extended his arm. His confidence was magnetic, and I couldn't help but notice the admiring glances he received. "You clean up well," I said, trying to mask my nervousness. "Coming from you, that's a high compliment," he replied, his voice warm. As the night progressed, Lucas stayed by my side, shielding me from probing questions and nosy socialites. When the orchestra began to play a waltz, he offered his hand. "Dance with me," he said, his tone more a command than a request. I hesitated, but his steady gaze convinced me. As we glided across the floor, I felt a connection that had been absent in my previous relationships, a sense of being seen and understood. "You're not what I expected, Celine," he murmured, his voice low. "You're so much more." His words lingered in my mind long after the music ended. Clara's optimism finally gave way to despair. Elijah's inability to adjust to their new life strained their relationship to the breaking point. One stormy night, as Elijah sat brooding by the window, Clara approached him with tears in her eyes. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "You're not the man I fell in love with." Elijah's anger flared. "And you're not the dream I thought you were, Clara. Do you know what I've sacrificed for you?" Their argument escalated, and by morning, Clara was gone. She left behind a note and the engagement ring Elijah had given her. My partnership with Lucas evolved into something deeper. One afternoon, he surprised me by taking me to a vineyard on the outskirts of the city. "I thought you could use a break," he said as he handed me a glass of wine. The sun painted the horizon in shades of gold as we sat under a trellis of blooming roses. Lucas shared stories of his childhood, of the years he spent yearning for acceptance from a father who barely acknowledged him. For the first time, I saw the vulnerable man behind the confident exterior. "You deserve happiness, Lucas," I said softly. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "And you deserve someone who sees you for who you truly are, Celine." Before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed me, a gentle, tender kiss that left me breathless. In that moment, I realized that Lucas had not only earned my trust but also my heart. Elijah, now completely alone, returned to the city in search of redemption. When he saw me with Lucas, he looked like a man haunted by ghosts. "Celine," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "I was a fool. I see that now." I met his gaze, no longer feeling the pain his words once caused. "We all make choices, Elijah. Yours led you here, and mine brought me peace." Lucas's hand found mine, his touch grounding me. Together, we walked away, leaving Elijah in the shadow of his past. Lucas and I married in a ceremony that reflected the strength of our bond. Our love had grown from a seed of mutual respect into something unbreakable. Together, we rebuilt our family's legacies, creating a life filled with joy, trust, and unwavering support. Looking back, I knew that my rebirth had not just been about revenge or survival, it had been about finding a love that was worth fighting for. And with Lucas by my side, I had finally found it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel.